Hello there. What's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to be bringing to you a different kind of video, and I want to talk a little bit about the channel, the direction of the channel as a whole, and specifically reviews, unpaid versus paid reviews, and kind of give you guys some disclosure as to what's been going on with me, and also respond to some other things that have been going on in the community. So what I want to talk about is Rodney from Watch It Played recently did a video for Board Game Geek and talking about community issues, and specifically the issue that was talked about was paid reviews, and that being, is that a problem, and kind of some of the areas. And it's a fantastic video to basically summarize. He talks about different types of content and whether users can trust that content. If there's bias in a review, which generally that's kind of the nature of the review, is to apply your own bias and direct people on whether or not they should spend their money on a game. But if they're being paid by that manufacturer, how much could that skew their bias, and therefore maybe it's not really a trustworthy review. And in talking about all these things, but he also talked about unpaid reviews as well as paid previews and paid learn to play videos and things like that, and the distinctions between all of them. And so I thought this would be a good time to kind of respond to that subject, as well as to give you guys some full disclosure on just how I run this channel and where my reviews and opinions and everything are coming from. So there's a lot of different things to talk about. So the first thing I want to talk about is previews versus reviews. So if you haven't followed me for a while, basically I do a lot of Star Wars content, specifically a lot of Star Wars board game content, games like X-Wing, Armada, and Star Wars Legion, and that's what got me into this game. I don't do any type of paid review or paid previews. I've never actually accepted any payment, as far as dollars are concerned, for any type of video. The closest I've ever come to accepting anything is the product itself to review. And I think that's pretty standard because it's kind of hard to review a product that you don't have. Now, by and large, most things that I end up reviewing are things that I've purchased out of my own pocket to review for you guys. And one of the things that makes that possible is the ad revenue from some of the videos that I get, which isn't much, but it does help offset the costs, as well as Patreon, which is another thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, because Patreon is actually a big help, and I think a potential solution to some of the problems in the industry. So I have also done some Kickstarter previews, and I'm going to be doing a little bit more of that in the future, but I will admit I probably have screwed up a little bit, because there's a distinction in the past. At least at one point I did a Kickstarter preview but mislabeled it as a review, and that was on me. That was when I was younger or newer getting into this, and it's not that it's not that big of a problem, I don't think, but it is technically inaccurate because I'm not really reviewing the final production version of a game at that point. I'm really giving a Kickstarter preview is more of a here's how the mechanics of this game work, and here's some of what you can expect if you back this Kickstarter, because usually a Kickstarter tends to have a lot more stuff that go into a game. So a preview is really just like a first look, and it's not meant to be a final review of how the game will be delivered to the consumer. And that's really what a review is about. It's as the consumer, what are you going to get, and how are you going to appreciate this game when you get it, compared to how it looks very early in Kickstarter, which is a preview. So I have not ever accepted any payment for any of that stuff, although I do often accept the actual product in order to review. And I usually disclose that because it's let's see, you couldn't have a Kickstarter prototype unless, of course, they sent it to you. In some other cases, somebody will send me things to unbox and review for you guys. That's pretty rare that happens, that a manufacturer will reach out and say, hey, we want to send you something, would you review it? But it does happen, and I have a couple of reviews like that coming. And generally, in those cases, I will announce that that they sent this to me to look at, because in theory that could skew the bias. If I absolutely hate something, some people have approached me before and said, well, if you're positive in your reviews, how do we know that you're not just being overwhelmingly positive, or generally positive, and leaving out your negative criticisms in hopes of getting more games? And I think that's a valid criticism, and I think it's worth talking about. first off, I think it's important from my perspective to know that I got into this as a hobby, and it's still very much a passion for me. And I started out making videos only for Star Wars X-Wing, and as the Fantasy Flight Star Wars IP has kind of grown, I started to make more games because I fell in love with X-Wing. I watched my first video on my birthday of Star Wars X-Wing, and then quickly just wanted to find more and more videos. And at the time, there weren't very many at all. And that's why I started my channel, because I said, hey, there is not enough X-Wing content. There's not enough battle reports. There's not enough strategies. There's not enough unboxings. There's not enough, X-Wing content for me to watch, because I couldn't get enough of it. And so I said, well, I'll just start making my own. And anytime I saw an absence, I would make a video. One of my earliest, biggest videos were what to buy first when you're on a budget, because that was exactly my case. I was on a budget and I didn't know what I should buy versus what I shouldn't buy. And anybody I talked to, I'd always ask them what did they recommend. I ended up buying everything anyway as time went by. That being said, I got into this with complete passion, and that's still what drives me. And so as I have adopted new games and as I've grown to really appreciate them, I have expanded on them. And so games like Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Armada, and Star Wars X-Wing, I love these games and I cover them because I'm playing them, and that's what I do in my free time, which is not that much. I haven't actually been able to play X-Wing, Armada, or Legion in like the past 2 weeks or so, just because I've been so busy. So but when I do get to play these games, I absolutely try to record the battle reports and actually try to get new content out there, because it's something that I love to do. And I hope, if you've been following me long enough, that you believe that that's true. If not, then I don't know what to tell you. But my passion for these games is absolutely genuine. But beyond just those games, I also cover a lot of board games, and that's where I think some of the the concerns are, because a lot of these games are new or haven't come out yet. So that's what I'm going to talk about next, is like where the whole paid reviews, because I don't think anybody that watches me would think that I need to be paid to talk about X-Wing or Armada, because I can't stop talking about them. If anybody who's played in a tournament or with me at a store, I will just talk and talk and talk about these games constantly, and it's something that I love to do. But I can understand maybe the criticism for a new game. Well, like Outer Rim came out recently, and I did I bought that out of pocket. I got an early copy. I was very happy. I made a couple of videos about it. I've done how to plays. I did an unboxing, and I did a review. I might even do a solo plays pretty soon. But it's a good game. It's a game that I enjoy, and it's a game that addresses a weakness in the market, which was truly multiplayer Star Wars games. But I was also kind of critical with it. And I can see the idea is like, well, you might not be so critical if it meant that you wouldn't get any more free games or whatever. Well, Fantasy Flight doesn't send me free games anymore. I did get one wave of stuff pretty early, which was Wave 7 for Star Wars Armada, which was the Chimera and the Profundity. They sent those out to me early, and I was overwhelmingly blissful at that. That was amazing, because it was also stuff that hadn't been spoiled yet. And I made it pretty clear in those videos that FFG sent those to me, and I thanked FFG in those videos. I was going to buy them anyway, and maybe that's why they don't send me stuff anymore, because they're like, well, he's going to buy it anyway. I don't know. But I think also the case with Fantasy Flight is they're pretty big, and they have an enormous number of people requesting review copies of just about everything under the sun. So they only have so much to go around. So I was just grateful to get a piece of the pie. That was great. I don't know if it's ever going to happen again. I hope it does. I would love to get a review Super Star Destroyer, and full disclosure, yeah, that would save me $200. I would love that. Who wouldn't? I'm not gonna lie. If they send it to me, I'll let you know that they sent it to me. But if they don't, I'm gonna buy one anyway. So regardless, that's kind of how I am with the Star Wars games. So as far as regular other board games, I do occasionally do reviews of regular board games or how to plays or Kickstarter previews, and so I get approached a lot for different games, and I turn down an awful lot of them. I probably turn down more than I accept, because I do get a lot of, hey, we want you to review this. So sometimes it's too off-brand. Although I will do, a good board game I'll do regardless of, if it's not even sci-fi related. I did like Dice Forge, for example, which is just a great game. If it's a good enough game, I'll absolutely, be thrilled to cover it. So, if something's like too off-brand but doesn't seem like it has enough draw, I generally will decline. If something is too weak in the components, usually I will find myself declining. And what that means is if it doesn't have good art, if it doesn't have, if it looks very simple. Like if it's just little wooden cubes on a map without art. I had a request, to cover a game that was basically just circles and squares on the map, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't think I could review this game and give it a favorable review. I would probably destroy this game if you sent it to me. Do you still want me to do that? Because I don't think that's constructive. So what I will do, if you're a publisher and you contact me and say, hey, we want you to take a look at this game, if it sounds like something I'm into, I'll say absolutely. If it sounds like it's something I'm absolutely not into, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why. But if you do something like, I usually try to give constructive feedback. But sometimes there's middle ground. Sometimes I'm not sure about a game, so I'll ask a little bit more, and I'll be like, well, can you tell me a little bit more about this game? How does it play? What are the components like? Do you have any samples of the artwork? If I think it's something that's going to look good enough, it's going to generally appeal to me, then I will agree to take a look at it. And let's say I get a game and I absolutely hate it, or if I don't like it or whatever, well, generally one of the things I will do is I'll reach out to the publisher and be like, hey, I've got this problem, and this problem. In one of my last Kickstarter previews, I had some issues with the game, and instead of just leaving a terrible review, I went back to the publisher. Turns out I had, at least in one case, I had a rule incorrect that totally changed my appreciation of the game. And that's an important thing, because as reviewers, we can make mistakes. So how many games are out there, if you got one key rule wrong, it totally ruins the game? That's a really big deal. And then also, there were some refinements that made the rules a little bit more clear. And after going back with the publisher, it's able to change the way I'm like, okay, no, well now this is, now it's sitting more favorably. So as somebody who does reviews and previews and even the occasional learn to play, that's something I think that is important for reviewers to do, is that if you've got criticism, rather than just completely thrashing stuff, talk about talk about it with the publisher first. Maybe they decide, hey, you know what, this is good feedback. We're going to delay our Kickstarter. We have to fix this. And then maybe you can do some good for the community, and then a more quality product comes out. I have done a lot of playtesting in the past, so I'm used to giving honest feedback that I think can be constructive. And that's what I always try to do, is I try to stay constructive. The other thing is when I do my reviews, or previews at least, but also reviews, I tend to try to focus on the positive and those positive aspects. I definitely try to highlight them. I'm not saying I'm going to exclude the negative, but a game can have both good and bad things to it, and maybe I'm just more excited about the good things. There's so many board games out there. If a game does something really, really well, but isn't perfect in another area, I tend to be just okay, I get that it's not great there. Maybe it takes a long time to play, but boy, it does this really good, and no other game does that, so I think it's worth talking about. And so that kind of are the things that influence me. Generally, I don't tend to make reviews for games that I really don't like. One example, and this is one that I probably need to go back to, is Discover, Lands Unknown by Fantasy Flight. I bought that with the intention of playing it and reviewing it, and after one playthrough, I was abysmally mortified. I don't think I would say I hated the game, but it's a game that I said, well, if I do a review of this, it's going to be nothing but negative. And I think, having had some time passed, that I probably need to play it a couple more times before even attempting something like that. But I'm less inclined to go and do a negative review on a product, because if I don't have some honest feedback and suggestions for improvement, then I don't know if I'm doing anything good, other than maybe steering you away from it. But to do that, I need to be a little bit more honest and probably put a little bit more time into a game. It's just harder to motivate yourself to play a game that you don't like, just in hopes that you like it more the second time around. So that's kind of why I haven't gotten around to things like that. But another reason I haven't reviewed as many board games is, well, I have a pretty decent amount behind me, and I have some more in different places, but this is just one selection of them behind me. A lot of these have been out for a little while, so it seems a little strange for me to review games that are already out, because usually reviews tend to be most valuable when they're for a brand new game or an early access game. If I get an early access copy, it makes more sense to do a review, because you may be thinking of pre-ordering it or something like that, or picking it up on the day that it's released. Which brings me to one of the conclusion points is, Rodney talks about, what about unpaid reviews? While the consumer might say, well, this is good for my wallet because now this person's being biased, On the other hand, it takes somebody a significant amount of effort to actually conduct a review, to play it a sufficient number of times, to gather that feedback, organize that feedback, come up with the script and the plan, record the video, all the video equipment, and all of that other things. And he makes the point is, shouldn't a reviewer be compensated somehow? Because doesn't that reviewer have to pay bills also? Don't they necessarily need to get paid for their work? And, I get that a lot of people get into this with a passion or hobby in mind, but at the same point, there's a lot of people also doing it professionally. And while I'm not doing this full time, I do take it pretty seriously. And I agree that, being paid for your work helps pay for the costs of bringing you the content. Everything from the tripod holding the camera, to the lighting, to the shelves holding the board games behind me, to paying for the games themselves. All of those things have costs, as well as, time is effectively money, because if I'm not making a review on this game, I could be making another video about maybe some kind of X-Wing video that I'm pretty sure will get more hits. But I try to spread out and diversify a little bit because it's something I enjoy. I like board games as well as miniatures, and tabletop skirmish games as well. So I like a lot of that stuff, and I try to bring a little bit of a lot of different things to a bigger playing field. And I think there's a great reason to do that. And one of the reasons to do that is to reach more people. It's one of the reasons I talk about Star Wars news in addition to Star Wars games, is just because there's probably Star Wars fans out there that are going to see an episode 9 video that I've made that will then also be recommended a Star Wars X-Wing miniatures game video, and then maybe that will get them into to taking a look at tabletop games, and that might get them into playing board games with friends, and might, lead them to new social circles and open up a whole new world for them. Because that's exactly how it happened with me. I was watching Star Wars videos, and I found a tabletop video with Will Wheaton, and they were playing X-Wing miniatures game, and then, it took me down the rabbit hole, and then the next thing I knew, I was playing other tabletop games, and it just opened up a whole new world for me. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do for other people as well. It also works the other way around, in hopes that maybe a board gamer who will be looking for, let's say, Dice Forge, since I already mentioned Dice Forge, will see that video, see my channel, then also get introduced to something like X-Wing or Armada or Legion or something like that. And it will just kind of cause people to kind of broaden their horizons a little bit. And so that's one of the reasons I branch out and cover multiple types of games. But also because I genuinely really like these games. So with that said, the question that Rodney posed at the end of his video, and I will put a link to that in the description below because it's a great video and I think it's worth a watch, is, what solutions are there to fairly compensate a unpaid reviewer that can also help pay for the costs of things without kind of, skimming their bias? And I think programs like Patreon are an excellent way to do that. I have a Patreon as well, and I want to give a big shout out to my supporters. Their names will be at the end of the video. Check the link as well if you're interested in supporting me on Patreon. But Patreon is a way that you can potentially support board game reviewers, and not just me, but any other board game reviewer or any other content creator that you appreciate, that you can help pay for their costs, and at the same time not skew them to a specific bias, because now my money's coming from my audience who trusts me to give honest reviews, not coming from a manufacturer who's trusting that I'm going to only skew myself towards selling their product. Look, if the product's good, I'm going to help sell it, of course, because I'm going to be honest with you, but that's not the goal. The goal is to be honest with you and not to just sell a narrative. So I think Patreon is a great way to keep creators honest, as well as to show their feedback. And the problem that could arise, though, and when I first started my Patreon, some of the feedback I got from all of my viewers like you is, well, don't make Patreon only patron exclusive videos, because I don't want to miss out on your content just because I can't afford to give you $5 a month. And I understand that not everybody can afford, and I'm not requiring that you do that. And I don't make Patreon exclusive content for the most part, although there could be like some behind the scenes stuff, but it wouldn't really be like my core content. So one of the things that what I have done for Patreon is done early access videos. I also do some giveaways on there, and some kind of behind the scenes photos, like, oh, hey, here's this. I get some early looks at that and can get some discussion. I also have some Discord rewards for patrons as well. I have a private Discord channel. But another thing that I'm thinking of doing with patrons is I talked about board game reviews and games that are already out. Well, I've got a lot of games behind me, so from time to time I'll put up votes on Patreon if there's any of these existing board games that you want to see reviewed. Like, why do you have that on your shelf? Well, not every game that's on my shelf is a game that I love. There's actually some games, and I have another shelf to the side of me over here of games that I haven't actually played yet. So whether they're games that I bought on a sale, or games that were gifts, or games that I just haven't gotten around to playing yet. Maybe because I don't know how to play them yet. And so that's, so those of you who are patrons or are interested in joining the team, that's one thing you'll be able to steer in the direction of. And so I'll try to do, a vote at least once a month, depending on how it goes, maybe multiple times a month. But I think that could be a fun thing to do and a good excuse to talk about games that already exist that might not be getting that much attention right now. And it's also a good way to focus on games that may be getting expansions as well. So we'll take Dice Forge, for example. I just did a video on the Dice Forge Rebellion expansion, but the way they've designed the box, there's certainly room on a shelf for at least one more expansion. So as time goes by and they potentially get another expansion lining up for Dice Forge, maybe it's a time to take another look at Dice Forge and how has it held up over time, or maybe do a full-blown review, because I think I did a learn to play for Dice Forge, but I don't think I actually did a review, and it seems like it would be weird to do a core game review of Dice Forge now after the fact, after it's been out for 2 years already. But that's one of the things that you can help vote on. So if you're interested in joining the team and helping promote the Unpaid Reviews, which is basically one of the things that I do, you can click on the Patreon link down below. I have multiple different tiers of support, and you can pick whichever one works for you. And if you can't, I totally understand. But Patreon has definitely been very helpful. One of the things it helped me do is it helped me get a green screen behind me. So a lot of my other videos, if you see like motion or Starfield backgrounds where I'm talking to the camera, I'm able to do videos like that. Yeah, I do live in Florida and I record in my garage, but during hotter days, it becomes absolutely impossible to make content out here. And so the green screen allows me to record inside the house without having the kids running around in the background. And it's one of the things that I try to do as a father of 3. And my house is usually a mess. And so that's one of the things that has allowed me to create more content. So big thanks to patrons for your continued support there. And that's about all I've got to say. So be sure and check out Rodney's video in the description below. And I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions for me about how I run the channel or anything else about my opinions and things that are coming up, I encourage you to ask them down below. I also do a lot of giveaways. If you're new here, all of my giveaways, you have to be a subscriber and leave a comment to enter. So it's very simple. I have one going on right now, but you can check that out in any of the other videos. I'm not really using this video as an excuse to talk about the giveaways, but they're out there. So, and again, this is also going to be out there for a long time, so there's always new ones starting up all the time. So that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.